So I've been getting a lot of questions like this asking what the men folk did in the Amish since the women worked so hard. They worked just as hard. It was just not in the house. We worked in the fields and in the barn, on the farm. My dad woke up before 6 every morning along with my mom and went out to the barn, did the chores. Of course, us kids helped him. Milked the cows and then ate breakfast. Right after breakfast, he would be right back in the barn hitching up a team ready to hit the fields if it was planting or harvest time or anything to do with working the fields. A farmer's work is never done. And when he wasn't working in the fields, he would be hauling manure. We'd have to load it up by hand onto a manure spreader, and it takes a while. On average, roughly about a load per day, especially in the winter, is what it takes to clean out an Amish barn. So on the days that you don't have any other work to do, that's usually what you're doing. And anything around the house or around the farm that need it built, whether it be fence, buildings, roofs, anything like that, my dad did by himself. He worked construction part-time until us kids were old enough to get jobs and help out with the bills because the milk check just wasn't enough. And a lot of things that my mom was in charge of, like the garden, he would help her with. She would just tell him what to do. He would do the plowing, help with the planting and the harvest. When we did the butchering, Dad was the one who did the butchering, and then we'd take the meat inside and Mom would be in charge of processing it. And of course, every step of the way, as kids, we're right there beside them helping. But this video is about my dad, so I'll save that for another time. My dad was a kind, gentle soul. He had a beautiful outlook on life. He loved nature. And no matter what, he would always be happy about the weather. He said, we don't complain about that because that's something God's in charge of. And if the sun was shining and 100 degrees, he'd say, let's make hay while the sun shines. If it was raining, he'd say, it's $1 million rain. Crops needed it. If it was snowing, he'd be like, man, isn't this beautiful? We were out cutting wood in the winter, in the snow, being cold, and he'd be like, cutting wood is awesome because it warms you up twice, once when you cut it and again when you burn it. He was a respectful, kind, and fair man. He always had a huge smile for everybody. And even when I had been bad and he was punishing me, I was still aware that he loved me. He used to do this thing where when I was bad where he'd say, okay, I owe you a spanking. And then a couple days would go by and I'd be thinking about it the whole time. It wasn't any fun. If I'm half the man my dad is, I'll be blessed.